Great. Welcome to this week's QuickBooks Enterprise webinar, where we're going to be talking about all things reports. So today, again, we're going to be talking about reports. So we're going to be going over preferences, navigation, saving reports, talking about some different filters and options, and then we'll also touch on a couple of my favorite reports here. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about preferences. So there are some preferences that are related to reports on both the company and my preferences areas. So I'm on the My Preferences tab right now. We can, one of the big ones, sometimes if you're taking a report's taking a long time to run, having it set up or having your preference set up so that it automatically refreshes can just make it so every single time anybody makes a change, it's constantly having to refresh. So sometimes you might want to change that setting to prompt you to refresh, or don't refresh it at all. And then there is a button on the report that says to go ahead and refresh it. If we look at our company settings, so we have our summary reports basis, so whether it's cash or accrual, and these can be changed also at the report level. So this is at the company level, so the default that everyone's going to see when they go to run a report. But on those individual reports, you can change them, to whatever basis you want to view them on, which may be different than the basis you file taxes on, right? So you might file taxes on an accrual basis, but when you're running commission reports and getting ready to pay out your sales reps, you want to pay them based on what invoices have been paid, not necessarily what invoices have been created. When we talk about aging reports, so we have a couple options for the AR and AP side. So aging from the due date of an invoice. So it's going to start counting, 1 to 30, 31 to 60, et cetera, once that due date arrives, or from the actual transaction date. We can also choose to show reports, show on reports to show items by either the name only, description only, or the name and description. So sometimes if we have a client that maybe the name of their item is more like a SKU name and the description of their item really tells them what that item is, then we might choose this option so that when they're running, a sales by item summary report, they can see both, or even just showing the description only. We also have the same option for accounts, so showing not only the account name, but the information that's in that description field on accounts. And then you also have the statement of cash flows. So this is where you can classify your cash to tell QuickBooks where you want it to appear on that report specifically. And then we also have some default formatting for reports. So if I come in here, I can see what my company name is going to be labeled as on the report preferences for everybody. And then if I wanted to change my font, or I didn't want to see reports with cents, right, those are all options here as well. Okay, so how do we get to reports? So we're going to go over a couple of ways, because in QuickBooks, there's always several ways to get to where you need to be. So first, and then probably one that people are most common with, is up here at the top. We have this reports menu. We can go to our reports center and see some different reports here. Some of the standard ones, if we have any memorized ones, those will show up in here as well. Any reports that we favorited, which we don't have any. So we can go into the different areas, and these would be very similar to what we see over here on these menus, right? So we have company and financial here, company and financial here. We've got our different, profit and loss, balance sheet. If we are using classes, we're going to see that one as well. And then, of course, banking, if we want to look at our previous reconciliation. So we are initially starting to look for a report, and even when we're creating a new one, we try to start with one that has most of the information on it that we're looking for, or has that data organized in a way that makes sense to us for whatever the type of report is that we're running. So we would generally be looking in one of these areas first and then starting from there and then modifying as we go. So from that top menu is one way. We also have, if we're on a list, could be the customer list, a vendor list, a chart of accounts or items. I'm going to show the customer center here, but if I right click on this customer, I can run a quick report for that customer, which will show me all the transactions related to that customer. Or I could show an open balance report that's just going to show me what transactions have not been fully paid or have, an unapplied payment or something on them. You can also run those reports from these buttons as well. So, clicking on quick report here, it's going to default to this month to date. I can quickly change that to all if I want to see every transaction for that customer. And then when we go to the chart of accounts, if we are double clicking on any of the balance sheet accounts, it's going to pull up that register. So if we want to look at a report, we just need to right click on there and then choose quick report, and then it'll give us the transactions for all time, and then we can define what date we're really looking for to narrow that down. When we're talking about any of our profit and loss accounts, so income, expenses, other income, etc., cost of goods sold, right? When we double click on a report, it is going to default to showing us that because there's not a register for that account type. And it's also going to default to showing us this year to date. So I'm in a sample file. That's why I'm working in the past here. So once we have a memorized report, now you might in your QuickBooks have your icon bar over here on the left. I just prefer to have mine up here at the top. And I can also, if I wanted to, there's a lot of these buttons up here that I don't necessarily need. I can also customize my icon bar. So I can just kind of free up some space here. And now I've got all this area here, and I can come back up to view, add account quick report to my icon bar, and then I can name it what I want to name it, and it will go up here. And so then from that point forward, if I just click that button, it'll immediately pull up that report. One thing that's important, and I always guide clients, is that if we're setting up a report like that, we usually want to use a relative date. So last month, this month to date, this fiscal year to date, last quarter, because that way when we run the report, it's going to show us the information that we want to see relative to that date. If we set it up to run, custom, a specific date range, then every time we go run that report, it is going to run for that specific date range and not modify as time's passing. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And this is just a little bit easier to access. You still have the memorized reports list, right? We still have those in here. We can still add a new group if we wanted to. We can move reports around. So similar to how our other lists work in QuickBooks, we can drag and drop things around. And we can also delete the memorized report, and that will take care of that group. It's not technically a report, it's a group. We have things grouped. So if we have, all of our month-end reports together as an example, we can also process that group all at once. We can say if we want to display it or print it, and it will cycle through these reports, and we can set them to run for that same date range as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about filters and options. So whenever we're running a report, and I'm just going to go to my sales by item detail here. Let's look at an invoice. So on a transaction in QuickBooks, like a bill, an invoice, a credit memo, Right, we have this area up here at the top that's kind of called the header area of the transaction. And then we have individual lines down here below. When we're running a report, sometimes I'll hear from clients, I can't see a particular field, right? I can see that I can add that field to the report, but when I add that field to the report, I don't get a value that I'm expecting. So to demonstrate that, if I come over here and I look at my AR aging detail report, and I want to customize this report, and I wanted to see, just add the item field, right? This is based on the header area of the transaction, right? So what's the total open balance on that invoice? What's my invoice number, my customer? If I have a PO number assigned to an invoice, it's going to show me that. And although it will add the item column, you're not going to get any information in that field on your report because it's pulling its data from this area up here and then, of course, whatever our open balance is. So you just have to think about that when you're, number one, starting from a report that's close to what you're looking for. But then also, this all plays into how you have your data structured and how and why we use sum lists a certain way, because that gives us the ability to report on that field a little bit differently sometimes than some other fields in QuickBooks. You do also have the option for custom fields. So that's definitely something that you can add as well, and you can filter on that too. So if we had a custom field for our item, as long as we have that field filled in on our transaction, at least on the screen view, even if it's not on the print view, we'll be able to run a report on it. So those are just kind of some tips and tricks about that. Now, when it comes to customizing our report, so we have a couple of options here. So first on this display tab, we can pick the date range that we want to run it for. Of course, you have that up here as well. We can also say what columns we want to add. I'm just going to pick a couple. If we did not want it to, run based on a report date, so if we're talking about an aging, we have that opportunity as well. When we come over to filters, these are, of course, all the different fields and transaction type, right? We have that as a drop down. You can see there's a custom field that I threw in here at some point with just some gibberish in it. But we can really pick what data we want on here. And of course, when we're picking these different filters, we're going to get different values that we can go from. So if I wanted to see amount from, 1,000 to 2,000 as an example, I can put that on there. I can also change my header area. So this is coming from my standard default report that's set up in my company preferences. But if I want this report to say something more specific in the header or whatever, I've done that sometimes if I'm, maybe creating a report for a specific sales rep or something, and I want them to see their name at the top so that they know it's their report. That's something that you can do here. And then also fonts and numbers, same situation, right? We can pick what font we want for all these different areas on our report. We can also, say if we want the report to display without cents, or if we want to have a parentheses for negative numbers, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And so you can see with that, it did filter down, and I'm only seeing amounts here that are between $1,000 and $2,000. I've also added these columns to my report from that menu we were on before. And if I wanted to remove those columns, if I added them in error, or I just I'm not interested in the information anymore, we can take them off. We can also drag and drop to move our columns around. So if we wanted to show those in a little bit different area on our report, we can do that also. One of the things that I like to do if I'm running, like let's say a profit and loss, and I'm running this for, let's just say, this fiscal year, and I show my columns by month, it might be kind of spread out. If we drag and drop just one of these, it's going to set all the columns to the same width as whatever we chose for that one. So that can just make it a little bit easier to fit, a profit and loss on one page wide, whether it's, um, portrait or landscape. So that's something else that you can look at just to improve the overall, um, presentation of your reports, I guess. Let's see. So now let's talk about some of my favorite ways to get to reports for clients. So if what they're looking for, I can't get to something similar, I know I have a good base to start with, then sometimes I'm just going straight to Control F for find. That can also come from our edit menu here. And this allows me to filter on, like they say, I'm looking for invoices, right? I can pick that from here. I'm looking for invoices that, have a specific item on them. I can choose that here. Maybe I just want to see all services, and I can click find. Now what you'll see on this screen here, right, is the results of those filters, right? What transaction type I'm looking for, what items I want it to include. If I wanted to filter on a customer or something like that, I could. And then from here, I click on report. And then I can go a step further. So if I wanted to just look at the Jonathan Graham class, I can do that as well. Or if I wanted to modify this and instead of seeing debit and credit, I just want to see amount, right? I can adjust it from here. And then it's just about looking at the data that you're getting, right? Are you getting the right results? Is there more information that you want? Are you getting some maybe that don't apply to what you're looking for? You can modify that here. Another cool thing about the find is I like to use it to get some transaction count sometimes. So if I'm looking for how many sales orders, as an example, a client has in their file, I can come in here and I can just click find. Now this is going to tell me how many total rows I have. So not just that header area of the sales order, but also any of the transaction lines, or if I'm selling inventory, there might be a couple lines. It's going to show all of that information here. If I wanted to just see a count, then I can go to detail level right here and choose summary. Now it's going to show me just exactly how many sales order transactions I have in this QuickBooks file. So that find report can be really useful because it's a good, again, if you're not sure, you can't find a good base one to start with, just start building it from scratch. This is usually where I'm going to do that. Sometimes I'll use the transaction detail report as well. But I like this because it just gives me all the things, right? Let's see, when I go into probably one of my favorite reports is the custom summary report in here. So when I'm explaining this report to clients, I kind of think about it as a simple pivot table, if you've ever run one of those in Excel. So I can filter my data. I can pick, how I want to display my columns and how I also want to display my rows. So if I wanted to look at my rows by, item detail or item type, let's say, and I wanted my columns to be my income statement accounts, that's going to show me, right, what types of items I'm selling and which revenue accounts those are going to. So that, is just another way to kind of slice and dice and view your data. You can, shrink the columns down like I just did there. I've also used this report if I'm trying to find, like I was talking to a client earlier today, actually, we were trying to tie out their sales by item summary report was not aligning with their income account. So what we did was we looked at all ordinary income accounts. So I filtered on that account type. I left my columns. I don't need to see this by column, so I just did total only. And then I did my rows by item type. So this shows me for all my income accounts, right? How is it broken out between my different item types? And right here is where we have some revenue that was recorded that did not go through an item. So that was of course going to cause a variance. If we're running our sales by item summary report and then we're looking at our income statement, we're going to see a variance there because this transaction is just a straight deposit going to a revenue account, not flowing through an item. So this might be something that we need to correct, or it might just be classified incorrectly, right? So those are just some of my favorite reports. I know we have a couple of other webinars on QuickBooks Advanced Reporting, which just allows for even more flexibility than you get in product, right? It is part of QuickBooks Enterprise, but it kind of runs a little bit outside of it. Just gives you a lot more flexibility in what data you can get to. Some of the fields, sometimes you might have trouble like kind of connecting the data in QuickBooks. You can also add, calculation columns, which you can't do inside of QuickBooks, right? We have to export it to Excel and do that. So if you've ever used anything like Crystal Reports, it's very similar to that. And then the other piece is we do also have the opportunity in Enterprise to combine reports from multiple company files. So if I was a business and maybe I had a couple of different LLCs, I could combine the profit and loss for multiple. It does do it in Excel. You cycle through each of the company files, entering the password as you go, and then it will create one tab for each report that you're running, and you'll see your columns will be whatever that company file is. So if I was running this I've got sample consulting, and if I had, sample retail also open, I'm going to see those two columns. So that's something else that is or does make QuickBooks Enterprise unique too. All right, so I hope you learned a little bit about reports during today's webinar, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks so much for attending.